Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be talking about our fifth tropical storm of the 2021 hurricane season. It's Tropical Storm Elsa, which formed east of Barbados, and now it's going to be moving into parts of the Lesser Antilles and eventually into the Caribbean, and potentially it could be making a run up through parts of Florida and the southeast. So we're going to be talking about all of that and more in today's video, so make sure staying tuned all the way until the end. And also, happy first day of July, and we're getting very close to the 4th of July. So happy early 4th of July weekend to all of you guys out there. Looking at the current National Weather Service page, as you can see, we have some flood watches through the central part of the country. So from New Mexico all the way to the mid-Atlantic, we have some flood watches just kind of scattered about through there. No real defined area, but it's more just a scattered area of flood watches in through that area. Looking at parts of the Northwest, we still have those heat issues. We have excessive heat warnings in that kind of purplish color. Parts of Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana, as well as some red flag warnings also for fire danger in parts of the Northwest, and then a few heat advisories in the oranges for parts of Montana, Idaho, California, and Oregon as well. Taking a look at yesterday's high temperatures, we had three tied high temperatures for the continental United States yesterday. Death Valley, California got to 114. So did Omak, Washington, where they got up to 114 as well. And Richland, Washington, all got up to 114 degrees yesterday. And that's actually quite surprising considering that Death Valley, California is all the way down here. Meanwhile, those two other plots in Washington are all the way up in the Pacific Northwest. So rarely do we see where Death Valley, California is matching the high temperatures of areas all the way up in eastern Washington. And these are even areas that are a couple thousand feet up above sea level. So you're not even down near 0 feet or maybe 100 feet above sea level. You're really high up there, 2, 3, 4,000 feet in some of these instances. So really surprising and really interesting to see how warm it has been. And unfortunately, a lot of those people who live in that area don't actually have any air conditioning, because typically it's never this warm in this area, and usually it only gets this warm once or twice every couple years. So hopefully you guys are staying safe and staying hydrated out there, especially with all of this warm weather that's been taking place. Yesterday we had a low temperature of 33 degrees in Peter Sinks, Utah, with a highest rainfall report in Lakewood Ranch, Florida, where they got to 4.6 inches of rainfall. Taking a look at the 5-day outlook, you can see that Elsa is the only storm currently on here. It's about to move into the Lesser Antilles and then eventually up near Haiti and eventually through Cuba, potentially moving into parts of Florida after that. But we'll have to see how strong it is after it moves through Cuba, because you do actually have a few fairly high mountain chains up through this area. So that might help break the storm apart. Again, that's going to all depend on the exact track of the storm. One thing that I did want to note, that Elsa is actually a record-breaking storm technically, because it's the earliest fifth storm that has developed. So this is the earliest E-named storm that we've ever seen. I believe the previous record was on July 6th, and that was actually the one that we broke last year. So we have 2 consecutive years where we broke this record. So the previous record was on July 6th, and that was of last year. And now we got one on July 1st. So we'll have to see if we can maybe break Faye's record, Gonzalo's record, and also Hannah's record, all from last year. And I think we have a good chance of getting Gonzalo and Hannah. I'm not sure about Faye. We're gonna be a lot more borderline on that one, but we definitely have a few more records that we could still break this season. Taking a look at Tropical Storm Elsa, which is also Invest 97L, whichever one that you want to use, located at 9.9 degrees north by 50.2 degrees west, maximum winds of 35 knots or 39 miles per hour, with a minimum pressure of 1,006 millibars, radius of circulation around 180 nautical miles, located about 668 miles south-southeast of Barbados, with also 1,219 miles southeast of San Juan, Puerto Rico. So it's still a ways out there. It's still not impacting any land masses just yet, but it has been moving fairly fast, about 20 miles per hour or thereabouts. So it has been moving at a decent clip, and we would expect that probably by tomorrow or maybe the day after, at the very latest by Friday, it would already be impacting parts of the Lesser Antilles and Barbados. So, again, we're going to have to continue to track this, and especially with what happens after it reaches past Cuba is going to be the real issue here. Whether this gets broken apart while it's going over the high terrain in Cuba, or whether it can stay intact and then impact Florida once again. So, we'll have to see about that. That would be the first, I believe, one of the first storms this year to impact Florida, and it would definitely be one of the bigger storms this year that has impacted that area. So we'll have to see what exactly happens with that. Taking a look at the satellite imagery, it is fairly well developed by this point. We are dealing with potentially some wind shear developing on the northern end of this, and that's self-made wind shear from the storm. So because of how strong the winds are, it is creating a little bit of wind shear on the northern end. Therefore, we are dealing with the strongest of the storm on the southern end of this storm, in the southeastern part of this storm. So you can see that this will move kind of like this and then curve up to the north. And again, the track is still a little bit uncertain here, although we are fairly certain that this will at least become a high-end tropical storm, maybe even a Category 1 hurricane. So here are the key messages, and I'll quickly read them out. The first one says tropical storm conditions are expected to begin early Friday in portions of the Windward and Southern Leeward Islands. The second one says heavy rainfall from the system will move quickly across the Windward and Southern Leeward Islands, including Barbados, on Friday. Isolated flash flooding and mudslides are possible. The third one says there is a risk of wind and rainfall impacts in portions of the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba, and the Turks and Caicos, and the southeastern Bahamas through early next week. Interest in these areas should monitor the system's progress. And then finally, interest in Florida should monitor updates to the forecast for the system, but it is too soon to determine what, if any, impacts could occur there next week, given the uncertainty in the long-range forecast. So again, I would say Florida, anywhere past Cuba, is where we have the greatest uncertainty on what it will actually happen. We have a fairly good certainty on the track up until that point. Taking a look at the National Hurricane Center's forecast, you can see that they're expecting this to move fairly swiftly to the north. So this would be by Friday. We're dealing with this storm almost already being in parts of the Leeward Islands, and then moving along there until about Saturday afternoon. That's when we get our next kind of stop in parts of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and then eventually, I would say probably Sunday afternoon is when we would get that impact in parts of Cuba, and then eventually into Florida by Tuesday morning. So again, we still have some uncertainty, especially out near Cuba. Once it reaches this area, this is when it starts to get a lot more uncertain on exactly where this storm will impact, and that's mainly due to the high pressure that's up here. We don't know exactly where that's going to be in another 3 or 4 days, so that's going to have a big impact on this storm, and just how strong this storm is will also have an impact. The stronger it is, the more likely it takes more of a northerly track. The weaker it is, the more likely that this just stays to the south and kind of moves along with the general flow of the atmosphere. Taking a look at the model guidance, you can see that most of these, again, have it hitting the Leeward Islands and then eventually moving into parts of just south of Haiti and south of the Dominican Republic, then making landfall with Cuba, potentially for the second landfall of the storm's history, and then moving into Florida. And then, again, you can see how wide this spectrum does get once we get past Cuba. So we start off with a fairly concise outlook where we're only about 100 to about 300 miles apart on any given side of the spectrum, and then we go all the way near the western edge of Cuba, and now we're dealing with potentially near 500 to 1,000 mile difference in where these storms might actually be impacted and located by that point. So we're dealing with a wide range of potential outcomes as we get past the Cuba. I think Cuba is going to be where we have most of the issues because, again, does this get weakened by the mountains in Cuba? If that does happen, then maybe this will probably go into the Gulf of Mexico. If it can stay strong, then it has a better chance of continuing up the East Coast. So again, once we get probably another 2 or 3 days closer to this event, we'll have a much better idea of what may happen. Taking a look at the GFS ensemble models, kind of gives you a good idea of what we're dealing with here. We have quite good uncertainty until that 60-hour mark, and then once we get past there, you can see how it just becomes a mess of just different colors. We have some models bring this to Louisiana. We have other models bring this closer to the Bahamas, and then eventually to the East Coast. So we have completely different outcomes, and that's again going to be very dependent on whether this gets torn apart in Cuba and how damaged the storm is once it reaches those higher elevations in Cuba, and then also where that high pressure sets up. So we have many different factors, and because of that, we do have some uncertainty with this event. Taking a look at the intensity guidance, you can see it is a weak tropical storm by this point. It's expected to at least become a middle or higher end tropical storm as we get to probably tomorrow or even into Saturday. And then as we get to right around Saturday evening into Sunday, Monday, and beyond there, that's when we're potentially approaching Category 1 status. We could potentially see hurricane status achieved, I believe, for the first time this hurricane season so far. So definitely an interesting storm so far, and this will definitely be one of the more memorable storms out of the ones that we've already had so far this season. If this were to become a hurricane, looking at the chances of tropical storm force wind speeds, you can see that the highest chances are going to be again closer to the eastern Caribbean, the Leeward and Windward Islands, but that's mainly because we have higher confidence in there. I would also probably extend this yellow or orangish shade probably up through the Dominican Republic and Haiti as well. But then again, as we get to Cuba, Jamaica, down through Florida and the Bahamas, that's when our forecast certainty gets a lot lower because again we have many issues with how intense this will be and also where exactly this will track. Taking a look at the wave heights, you can see that we will have definitely some beach concerns. You're not going to want to be on the beach over the next 4 days, probably. If you live anywhere in the Caribbean, in the Eastern Caribbean, if you live in the Western Caribbean, probably as we get to Friday evening and Saturday, all the way through probably Tuesday, you're probably not going to want to be on the beaches at all by that point because we will have, of course, that tropical storm imminent. And we will have fairly high wave heights, especially offshore where we could be getting wave heights up near 25 to 35 feet, and then you get closer to the shores, and of course they will go down a little bit, but still fairly high in many of these areas. So that is definitely one of the concerns with this storm. Taking a look at the sea surface temperatures, they're all above normal in this area, and that will help the storm quite considerably. We have sea surface temperatures that are all above 85 within the path or the potential path of this storm. So that's definitely going to help out this storm, and definitely that will be one of the things that's on the good side for the storm for its development. If we take a look at the amount of ocean heat content currently, in the amount of energy that this storm will be able to upwell from the ocean waters, you can see it's actually rather high, especially over the Caribbean. Now, this water has been untapped. Even last year, we did not see a lot of storms move through this area. So by the end of the hurricane season, we had a ton of untapped potential within this area where you had really warm sea surface temperatures, you had a ton of OHC throughout this area, and because of that, that could have we really dodged a bullet there. We could have seen a major hurricane just kind of roll through here last year and just kind of move up into the Gulf of Mexico. So luckily we did not see anything like that last year, but this is really worrying when you have these high amounts of energy just kind of under the just kind of lingering there in the water. So you really want to pay attention to this over the entire Caribbean and even through the Bahamas and through the southeast. We have high enough amounts of heat potential in the waters there, so definitely not an issue for the storm. That'll actually be a bonus for the storm. Taking a look at the amount of wind shear, close to none in many of these areas. You can see that we have a general area of high pressure sitting right here, and again, how far west does this go? How far east will this move? And that's all going to be a big question over the next couple of days. But if you're looking at wind shear, we don't have a lot going on. Again, you can see some of that self-made wind shear on the northern end of the storm, but again, it's not a ton, and I don't think it'll really break up the system too much. if we look at the amount of Saharan dust in the atmosphere, you can see that we do have some amount in parts of the Leeward and Windward Islands, but it's not a ton. You don't have a high amount of Saharan dust in this area, so it will kind of dry down the atmosphere a little bit, but it's again not going to be anything too significant. I don't think it'll really play a big part in this storm's development. And finally, if you're looking at some of the upper air systems right now, you can see that we have that storm in here. We have the high pressure, and this is, by the way, at 500 HPA, which is right around the 500 millibar mark. So this is a few thousand feet up in the atmosphere. We have your high pressure up here in the central Atlantic. We have a trough in through the eastern United States. So because of that, we're going to have this storm, if it will move through parts of Cuba, and if it is still fairly strong, once this trough moves out, we're going to have this high pressure move in behind it. So you're going to get squashed in between these two high pressures. This can still move up the east coast. It also has another option. If it is a little bit weaker, it could move into, again, areas like Louisiana, Alabama, or Texas, and that is, again, another option, just depending on how the upper air kind of sets up over the next couple of days. So again, there are still many questions that are left unanswered and that we still need to get answered over the next couple of days. We will probably, I would say by Saturday, have a fairly good idea of what may happen after this reaches Cuba and after this potentially gets torn apart by the higher terrain. Again, if this is stronger, it's going to probably move up the east coast or impact Florida and the Bahamas. If this is weaker, it probably slides underneath Cuba and then moves into areas like the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf Coast. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.